This year is the year of Mark, according to the calendar of the church. And because of that, I chose to speak about the Passion according to Mark, so that we understand the thoughts and the characteristics and the personality of this amazing writer, Mark, which, if we study the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we see almost the entire of Mark is in Luke and is in Matthew. Having said that, we need to understand that their Mark depended on other resources pre-Mark to put the story together. One of the main characteristics of this writer is Mark is a reductionist. He wrote in a short sentences and very intense and almost a summary of his thoughts. But this summary, or this very condensed materials, it is like a diamond. You dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you see multifacets, and we learn so much. And we are here. You are through the technology, and I'm here. We are the communion of saints. We are the church, gathering around the word, gathering around in communion with Christ. Remember that word, in communion with Christ. And this is what the church is all about. I want, first of all, to give you a couple of general characteristics of the gospel according to Mark, and the story itself, the passion story in that narrative. We have to understand that all the narratives of the gospel, all the four narratives we have of one gospel, we have one gospel, four narratives. The gospel is the good news, is the story of Jesus Christ in four perspectives, in four narratives. All the four narratives we have were written through the spectacles of the resurrection. And behind the resurrection, there is the passion story. I want to have three pillars of the salvific act of Jesus Christ. The salvation has three legs. The first leg is the Last Supper. And the second leg is the cross. And the third leg is the resurrection. Of course, you can add a lot of materials around it, but the three pillars that we must understand and dig deeper to understand the saving act of Christ is through the Last Supper, the cross, and the resurrection. And in the Gospel according to Mark, all the three pillars were written in an extraordinary way. And we will see that. Another characteristic we need to understand is that for Mark, actually, and many scholars say also for the other narratives of the gospel, actually the gospel is the passion story with an extended introduction. I love that. They say that the whole narrative of the gospel is an introduction to the heart of the gospel, which starts with the passion story. And even St. John, he is very theological and very spiritual and deep and philosophical in his writing. When it comes to the Passion story, we see John turning into almost a historian, that he starts talking about what happened. So in Mark is not different. Mark is very important that we understand the whole narrative of the gospel through the Passion story, through the three legs of the saving act. I want to highlight, for example, if you go to Mark 2:20, as early as 2:20, I will read the verse to you. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. Do you see the verse? We can't understand the verse unless we wear the spectacles of the passion and the cross and the resurrection. So when the bridegroom is taken away, so he's talking about the ascension. So, but he doesn't talk about the ascension in his narrative. Mark doesn't talk about that, but he talks about that Jesus will one day not be with us, as Jesus says himself. So even as early as the second chapter, even in the first chapter, we see hints of the passion and the resurrection and the cross. This is the perspective of Mark. Mark, when he writes with intense and very condensed way, even when it comes to time. We need to understand the time for Mark is very fluid, the entire narrative of the gospel. For example, in the second chapter, verse 1, several days later. What does that mean? It doesn't matter. Mark is telling us, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to tell you the story chronologically. I'm going to tell you what is important. Or chapter 8, verse 1, in those days. So Mark has those expressions. He speaks about general understanding of time. And the structure of the narrative helps us to understand how the story develops until we reach to the Passion story. So what happens in the Passion story? The Passion story, and I want you to look at the Passion story with me to explore those diamonds in front of us. Is it a Passover meal or isn't a Passover meal? So in the beginning of the narrative, on the first day of the unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparation for you to eat the Passover?" So they are offering, they are expressing, my friends, their subordination to Christ. So the feast is yours and we are your guests. This is the subordination of the disciples to the authority of Christ. And Christ, later we see that he accepts this authority. Because of that, I say to our dear friend Leonardo da Vinci. We all know him very well. My friend, your depiction of the Last Supper doesn't fit, because no way that Jesus would have sat in the middle of a table, and 6 on his right, 6 on his left, like in a photo shoot, or in Oxford or Cambridge colleges at the high table looking at the audience. Doesn't work like this. In the Middle East, we don't sit like this to have dinner. So this is not how it happened. So it was Jesus' meal. And we have to understand something which is amazing in this. Jesus, and I will say why at the end, Jesus invented the Last Supper for a reason. And I will tell you the reason at the end and keep you in suspense. And remember that Jesus invented that. And he sent 2 disciples and said, go to the city, to the suburb of Jerusalem, probably Bethany, and said, you see a man carrying a jar of water will meet you, follow him. It's a bit strange. First of all, it's rare that men carry ceramic jars of water, because usually at that time, women were the ones who carry the ceramic jars of water. So men don't. Do you remember what they carry? Skin. They put in a skin water or even wine. And Jesus speaks about the new skin and the old skin, because this is what men do. And this is very unusual sentence. And also, some scholars say, well, this is really like a supernatural arrangement of Jesus, like a mystery novel. You go there and you find someone who is carrying something, you follow him, and you enter the house, you say to the house master, the teacher wants, this is all like a Sherlock Holmes plot. How important is that? I don't know. But 2 things are important about it. The first one is the beginning, that the disciples put themselves under the authority of Jesus. And then inside this mystery Sherlock Holmes setting, Jesus say, enter and say to the house owner, the teacher asks. So he is revealing himself as the master, as the teacher, as the leader. So he accepts the authority and the responsibility that the disciples gave him in the beginning of the story. And ask him, where is my guest room where I may eat? I may eat the Passover with my disciples. It's a very authoritative statement or question. And where is my guest room? And remember, Jesus didn't have a home. And Jesus did not have a house to go to. So where did that happen? How did that, how was that arranged suddenly? It gives us a little bit similarity to, do you remember what similarities of this arrangement when he entered Jerusalem. He says, you go to the city and you see a donkey, and nobody rode this donkey before. So, and you take it. It's another Sherlock Holmes setting of entering into Jerusalem. So what he is saying, don't worry about the details. Just go and prepare the meal. So the two disciples went and prepared the meal. So what is the upper room? The upper room is a usual architectural character of the houses at that time. There would be a room upstairs where not for sleeping, but for the guests and for dining. And that would be properly furnished. And also, I say to our friend Da Vinci, the furnishing of the room probably would be a circle or oval, but that would not have the head of, there would be no head of table. But Jesus' place would not be in a place where he could not serve the disciples. So the place of Jesus would be in a at the edge, that he would bring the food to the disciples. He was the host. So every time I went from Lebanon to Syria, from the School of Theology to Syria, Mom never ever sat properly at the table, because I was there, and she was very, very excited that I was there. She would sit at the edge, closer to the kitchen. So she would jump to the kitchen all the time to bring food for me. I am the guest. So, and I would say, Mom, could you please sit down? I came here to see you. No. Because this is the expression of love, to prepare the food that I liked and all this. So Jesus would not have put himself in a place where he could not move. He would put himself in a place where he could serve the other disciples. So, and Jesus, by accepting the sovereignty, accepting that the feast is his feast, he directed that feast. And actually, it is because of that I started by saying, is it a Passover meal or isn't it a Passover meal? This is not the question. This meal was shaped by the sovereign Jesus. Jesus gave the meal the shape that he wanted. Jesus said, truly I tell you, as they sat around the table and they started eating, and then Jesus said, when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, truly I tell you, one of you will be betraying me. One who is eating with me. Well, Jesus, you really don't know what fun is. This is, this is the last time you have this fellowship with your disciples. And you tell them that one of them will betray you. Is this what you intend to do to destroy the fun? Because if it was a Passover meal, the Passover meals usually are joyful, historically. And later they became more and more and more joyful, so that the Jews later, they had to drink 4 glasses of wine per meal. 2 before the liberation and 2 after the liberation. So here, Jesus really destroyed the fun and said, one of you will betray me. And what happened? Everybody started saying, is it me? So he put them in a tunnel of suspense, of horror, of doubt. So they knew when Jesus spoke, he spoke with authority. When he said this sentence, it was a bombshell. And he knew that. He is not saying, one of you will betray me. That Judas, there are different opinions about that. Did Judas betray him freely? Or was it the divine plan for Judas to betray him? So this is the eternal dilemma of those who defend Judas and say, well, it was a divine plan, so it wasn't his fault. And other people say, well, if God created us free, then he could not have turned Judas into a marionette. So I would say it is the combination. It is the combination, and in Judas, 2 things met. The malice and the evilness of humanity, the broken humanity, and the plan of God. But God did not use Judas as a marionette, because Judas had a story, and the story led him to that decision. But the divine plan met in Judas with the malice of humanity. And Jesus continues Sherlock Holmes setting and doesn't say who the disciples that would betray him. He didn't say that. He said, one of you. And then he goes even further. Jesus said, the one who is dipping with me in the bowl. Well, as we all know, and those who don't know of you, we eat a lot of dips in the Middle East. Here it says, he took a loaf of bread. Well, we don't have a loaf in the same way that you have a loaf. The loaf is for us the pita bread. And this is what we break and take a piece of the pita bread and we dip into whatever is in front of us. Hummus or yogurt or olive oil or whatever. So Jesus is said, the one of you who is dipping with me in the bowl. Well, my dear Jesus, have you reinvented the wheel? Everybody is dipping, my friend. The one dipping with me in the one bowl indicates something very important, my friends, which is the intimacy between Jesus and the disciples. So he is saying, the one who is breaking bread with me and dipping in the same bowl betray me, he is saying, you are betraying the most intimate relationship I've had with you guys. In the Middle East, we still have, up to this moment, if I break bread with you, it's a covenant. It is a relationship, a special relationship. When you break bread with someone, we say, we have now bread and salt. خبز وملح in Arabic. And when you have خبز وملح, bread and salt with someone, then the relationship is a friendship, is intimate. Because of that, this is very important for Jesus to say, one of you is betraying the bread and the salt and betraying the intimacy that we have. Now, we come to the extraordinary act, which nothing like it happened in history. Jesus created in a genius way the Last Supper for that moment, including Judas, my friends. He did not exclude Judas from the intimacy to the last second. He took bread and broke it, and let's see what St. Mark says. While they were eating, he took a loaf, a pita bread, loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them and said, "Take, this is my body." Wait. What? He doesn't say, "This is like my body." He doesn't say, "This bread symbolizes my body. It's a symbol." No. Jesus goes all the way as a typical Syrian man to say all the meaning of his broken body on the cross, puts it in a earthly cultural icon, the bread. And here I say, the culture of God and the culture of humanity met together in this extraordinary act. When he broke the body, and he took the cup, and I tell you, he took the cup and said, then he took the cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." My friends, when do we separate the body and the blood? We separate the body and the blood only in violating the body, in violence, in an act of violence. So what he is saying to them, I will go through the most vicious, violent death. My body will be separated from my blood. But all of that is for you. He was establishing a bond beyond religion, beyond human understanding. He was establishing, and this, now I will reveal what I asked in the beginning of my talk. He was establishing the communion of Christ. When we understand the church other than this communion with the one who established the salvation and ripped heaven and brought the culture of God to meet our earthly culture in unity, in his body, in his blood. That is how we understand the church. This is how we understand us, you and I, coming together around this word. So St. Mark is amazing. So he anticipated, he was anticipating the violent death. And he's saying to them also in a very subtle way, you don't understand, do you? And you will leave me. And I will look up from the cross and I will see no one of you. But this act I am doing now, I am gathering you in a communion that will never be broken, so that after I rise from the dead, you will remember and come together again in that very same communion. This is amazing with Mark. He knows, Jesus knows, when he said, truly I tell you, I will never again drink the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. Of course not. Why? Because the next day he will die. He will not have meals and wine again because he will be dead. But still, the penny didn't drop. Until that very moment, the penny didn't drop. But all the pennies will drop after the resurrection. Because of that, we always look back from verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1 of Mark is incredible. Verse 1, this is the gospel of let me read it to you exactly how he wrote it. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. This courage came to Mark through the communion, through the Last Supper that he heard of, through this intimate meeting, intimate communion, fellowship, gathering. This is not unusual, by the way, in the Middle East. This is very usual that when we have something very major happening, for example, before I left Syria to study in Germany, it's a big thing. The whole youth group that I was leading came and we had dinner together, and they stayed with me until the next morning. This is not unheard of, but Jesus formed it, filled it in his way with the meanings he wanted the disciples to learn. And finally, he anticipated, when I drink it new in the kingdom of God, he's saying everything will be restored and I will drink it with you in that new kingdom. Yes, maybe you were disappointed that I was not the king that the people wanted me when I entered Jerusalem. Yes, I disappointed a lot of you that I didn't come into Jerusalem riding a horse and restoring the kingdom of Israel. Yes, but listen to me. My kingdom will be restored at the end, and the new wine will be poured for all of you. But then Still, they did not understand. I want to know how they felt when they understood all this. How they felt. What did Peter think when all the jigsaw puzzle pieces suddenly came together and he could see the big picture? That is the amazing thing. And the Last Supper, finally, I would say, is the bond between the eternal bond between the culture of God and the human culture, and the eternal bond between humanity and Trinity through the second person of the Trinity, the Son, who took body form, blood form, soul, and he breathed and taught among us so that he could build this bridge, could build this bond that no one, not even the gates of hell, can break it. Amen.